Hey everyone, Felix from Nintendo Life here, and today we're here to review Megaman Battle Network Legacy Collection for the Nintendo Switch. Now, this review was written by the stupendous Mitch Vogel and converted into video by me. So, in the early 2000s, an ancient and long-forgotten era where Capcom regularly released new Mega Man games, the company decided to produce not one, but two mainline Mega Man series on the popular Game Boy Advance. Mega Man Zero would continue the gameplay and storyline that the previous action platforming franchise were famous for, while another series, Mega Man Battle Network, would be set in its own world and follow an all-new RPG template. It was an unconventional idea to begin with, but Capcom quickly showed the value of its vision for these games, and now they've been brought back in their finest form yet under the Mega Man Battle Network collection. Mega Man Battle Network is set in the distant future in a parallel world to the mainline Mega Man timeline. Here, network technology flourished instead of robotics. Everyone carries around an advanced device in their pockets called a pet, which can handle various tasks such as sending emails and making phone calls, but most importantly houses the person's NetNavi. A NetNavi is an artificial intelligence that acts as the person's representative in the digital world of the internet, which here is realized as a physical space that can be navigated in much the same way as the real world. In keeping with the physical representation of a digital space, viruses on the internet take the shape of a bottomless onslaught of monsters that must be kept at bay by human/Navi pairs of net battlers. Each game follows the adventures of Lan Hikari, a spunky net battling kid, and his Navi, Megaman.exe, as they get caught up in various plots to save the world. Narratives are typically broken into a series of small arcs that somehow tie into Lan's school life, each of which culminate into a fight against another powerful NetNavi and advances the overall story a bit further. Though the games tend to rely a little too heavily on tired shonen tropes and overcoming all odds through the power of friendship, there's nonetheless a lot of heart at the core of the writing here. Lan and Mega Man's relationship is especially fleshed out through all the 6 games, and his core cast of supporting friends and allies adds to some nice texture to the storytelling as it evolves. Whether it be the somewhat adversarial friendship between Lan and his best friend Dex, or the will-they-won't-they subtle romance between him and Mail, there's a lot of great character-driven moments here to humanize the narrative. Gameplay in Mega Man Battle Network follows an RPG-esque structure where you explore isometric worlds as either Lan or Mega Man. Just about anything that uses technology can be jacked into, and many devices are directly connected to the internet itself, which acts as a big super dungeon that you slowly uncover more as you progress the story. Combat in this series employs an innovative take on action and deck building that, with the exception of One Step from Eden, has never been seen again in a new game since. Battles are randomly triggered, and you're whisked away to a grid-based 6x3 battlefield. The right half can be traversed by viruses, while the left half is reserved for Mega Man. Before battle begins, 5 battle chips, representing attacks or support actions you can take, are randomly selected from your chip folder and are presented to you for selection, though the odds are quite good you'll only be able to select 2 or 3 at a time. Every chip has an alphabetic code attached to it, and you can only select chips that are either duplicates of each other or share an alphabetic code. Once you've made your selection, you then shift to the action phase of battle, where you can nimbly move between the grid to avoid enemy attacks and line yourself up for effective shots at your enemies. Mega Man has his trusty Mega Buster for chipping away at foes, which can be charged to do a more damaging shot, though chips will always be your main damage source. As the action phase goes on, a bar at the top of the screen fills up over the course of a few seconds. Once full, you can then call up the menu to select more chips and repeat the cycle. In practice, this combat system remains a brilliant and dynamic means of engagement, especially given its relatively high skill ceiling. The later games allow your window to counter-attack enemies if you manage to damage them during the wind-up animation for the attack, both freezing them in place and doubling your next attack's damage. And while it's difficult to build a chip folder that outright doesn't work, a lot goes into efficiently building decks that utilize synergies between chip codes and elemental types, alongside with more technical considerations like animation timing. Building a proper chip folder is thus an interesting exercise, one that keeps renewing itself too as you slowly amass a larger collection of hundreds of chips. And while the average virus encounter doesn't push your skills too hard, there's still plenty of interesting ways that your foes play around with the mechanics. every boss will have their own distinct gimmick and elemental attacks too, such as requiring you to hide behind barriers placed on the battlefield to avoid a directional super attack. Depending on the game you're playing, there's also additional mechanics to expand the combat system even further. Battle Network 5 introduces Liberation missions, which adds an SRPG-esque mode to retaking certain areas of the internet from terrorists. Battle Network 6, on the other hand, lets you beast out in battle and turn Megaman into a half-beast version of himself that does way more damage, though you do so while running the risk that Megaman will lose control and use chips and attack randomly. We really appreciated how the developers iterated on this combat system with each successive entry. It never lost its core appeal, but every game brings in some interesting new ideas that really build it out. The only real drawback to this combat system is that it feels like the random encounter rate can be a little too high. You'll often find yourself attempting to solve a puzzle in a dungeon, only to be interrupted every few seconds by yet another group of easily defeated viruses. Battles typically take no longer than 30 seconds, and usually less than 10 seconds to complete, but it can still be an irritating and recurring surprise. Capcom didn't include any means of dialing down the encounter rate for this re-release, but it did see fit to include a Buster Max mode, which sees your Mega Buster doing 100 times its normal damage per uncharged shot. You can toggle this on and off at will at any time, and it trivializes just about any enemy or boss encounter, which can be a good solution to those who want to get through battles as painlessly as possible. Every Mega Man collection up until now has had a new additional mode added to round out the package, and Capcom has kept that going here by including a full-fledged online mode for trading chips and net battling. For battles, you can either play casual or ranked modes, and determine rules such as whether patch cards are allowed, or whether the loser has to pony up battle chips to the winner. We didn't get to give this mode a try, as other players weren't available during the review period, but it seems that this will be a great way of adding more playtime to the overall package, in case the mountain of content being offered in single player somehow wasn't enough. As for presentation, these games have stood the test of time reasonably well and still look good today. Though the overworld and exploration portions took a noticeable downgrade to a simpler art style from the fourth game on, the futuristic environments and digital landscapes nonetheless have a distinctive and evocative look to them, while the virus designs are both memorable and creative. Whether you're running through the busy streets of Den Town or rooting around in the seedy depths of the undernets, there's something quite charming about seeing such a bright and optimistic take on a futuristic society. Not to mention, it's rather cute to get a sense of how people in the early 2000s predicted the internet would look in the future. There's also various options you can select for changing the screen size, choosing various themed borders, or adding a gross, soothing filter if the jagged pixel edges bother you too much, which all culminates into giving you a decent level of control over how you want these games to look as you play. The soundtrack hasn't held up nearly as well as the visuals, but there are still plenty of memorable themes here. Even though the aging tinny quality of the Game Boy Advance sound chip is on full display here, Capcom managed to make the most of the hardware to produce some solid chiptunes, whether it be the peaceful theme of Lance Home, AC/DC Town, or the intense battle themes that can play across the countless battles and boss fights. It feels like some of these tracks can get a little too repetitive, especially the one that will play in multiple scenarios, but most of them don't grade too harshly. As for supplementary content, Capcom saw fit to include an extensive gallery of promotional and concept art for each game, alongside a music gallery for listening to the original tracks and some remixes. Additionally, the Japanese exclusive patch cards, it's like an old version of an amiibo, can now be scanned in from a menu in each game to give you some helpful goodies, and even the content tied to Konami's Boktai series has been included here. None of this is game-changing, sure, but it shows that Capcom went the extra mile to ensure that this would present their old games in the most feature-complete way possible. We also feel it needs to be said that there's quite a bit of content to explore for those who really get hooked by the gameplay on offer here. Every game can be beaten in about 20-ish hours, but you can easily triple that number or more for each game if you want to see all the content and attain full completion. Battle Network 4 requires you to play through the whole game 3 times before you can unlock everything, but most of the post-game content is quite compelling. Hunting down all the secret chips to fill out your library, solving esoteric puzzles, and taking on brutal super boss fights are par for the course here, offering up plenty of additional challenges for those who found the story to be a bit too easy. So to sum it all up, it's clear that a lot of effort and love went into this collection. This is a worthwhile re-release that gives you a lot of bang for your buck. While everyone will probably have their own reasons for which entry is their favorite, the Megaman Battle Network series remained remarkably consistent throughout its whole run, due in no small part to the innovative battle system and charming storylines present in each entry. If you're a fan of Mega Man and haven't given these games a shot yet, you owe it to yourself to pick this one up immediately. Even if you're not a Mega Man fan, these games each offer up some innovative RPG experiences that are certainly worth your time. We here at Nintendo Life give Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection on the Nintendo Switch a 9 out of 10. If you like this video, why don't you command your NetNavi to click that subscribe button, and don't forget to check out our website nintendolife.com for all sorts of reviews like these in written form. Big thanks again to Mitch Vogel for spending a lot of time with this review. Now, each entry in the collection may not be the longest per se, but when you add them all together, it's over hundreds hours of content, so yeah, just a big applause from my part. Oh, and while I have you, we also have a Discord server now, which you can find down in the description below, and I highly encourage you to join that if you want to chat to me, Alex, Sion, and just be a part of the Nintendo Life family. Stay safe, play some Mega Man games, and I'll see you in the next one. Felix from Nintendo Life, out.